It's day 8 of the lockdown in South Africa, and some people are already struggling to cope. I'm joined from Johannesburg by Sikander Kalla. He's a clinical psychologist via Skype. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. So how do people cope with this loss of control that comes during the lockdown period?
Thank you for having me. I think first and foremost, we need to understand that these are unprecedented times. And I think in that regard, we need to normalize whatever level of anxiety there may be, whatever level of depressive symptoms one may be experiencing. If there's practical shifts in your life, there's obviously going to be an aspect of adjustment that comes with that. And I think it's impossible to almost have such major ramifications from an economic perspective, occupational perspective, social perspective, and to not then experience some level of anxiety, some level of depressive symptomology. So I think the first thing that we really need to do is to understand that that is going to come away, and that is going to have impact on how we navigate through this 21-day lock and whatever other aspects of COVID-19 that's going to come our way. I think that would be key. The sooner that we're able to do that, the more we can then pick up on the triggers that is going to manifest as a result of the adjustments in our life. And I think in that regard, one of the best ways to understand that is to say, okay, let me be a bit more proactive rather than reactive. Let me see how this is going to affect my occupational functioning. Let me see how this is already affecting my social functioning. What measures can I put in place within my means at my disposal to work on that right now? And I think that should be rooted in some level of empathy, to understand that those around you, your loved ones and what have you, are also having a massive shift in their routine, especially children who may then also be picking up on our anxiety, picking up on our depressive symptoms, and need reassurance in those moments, and to then think about how we're going to tackle that.
How do you center yourself because of the amount of uncertainty that there is about everything? And I know you're saying that people must be proactive, but people literally don't know what's going to be happening in the next day or the next day in terms of their health and what's happening outside and possibly with their employment as well. So how do you find a way to, in that uncertainty, center yourself?
I think the first thing is to know what is within your control and what is out of your control. And I think we're dealing with a time now where almost everything seems to be out of our control on a global scale on how our healthcare systems are going to manage with this. So I think the first thing that people can do on an individual level is know what is within their control at that current moment, and what that can mean is staying psychologically healthy, making sure you're physically healthy, psychologically healthy, so that you're in the right state of mind to know that as things unfold week by week, how are you going to manage the new information that comes your way, and how are you then going to navigate based on those parameters. And I think key to that also is staying well informed with valid, accurate information as much as possible, so that you can almost have some level of guidance on how things are going to play. It needs to stay within reasonable proportions as well, because there's only so much you can do, as you said, when it comes to how much is being given, how much information is going out there. But we also know there's a lot of fake information going out there, which then just elicits further anxiety for individuals. So I think the more we can get accurate information, the more we can realize at the current moment, what can I do? Can I establish my routine? Can I make sure my neurovegetative symptoms are in order? Sleep, appetite, energy, monitoring all those sort of things, making sure that those things are taken care of, so that when the other things come our way, we can tackle that better.
The Harvard Business Review describes what a lot of people are going through together as almost collective grief. This uncertainty, this mourning for what was. Is that an accurate way to describe it? And what, if any, positives will emerge for people in a country like South Africa after a lockdown and after this uncertainty and after so much loss?
I think it really is a moment of great social cohesion coming into play. I think for one of those very few times in South Africa where we have so much inequality, we have so many people from different backgrounds, diverse backgrounds, structural constraints. I think this is one of the very few moments in which we're living through a shared reality. This is causing anxiety for almost everyone. And I think go a long way to say this is a shared experience. We have similar narratives at play here. We may have different means in how we're going to go about it, but what is key is that this is a shared collective experience. And I think that's where I was saying we need to tap into that empathy and to say, this is going to be difficult for everyone. Let's work on it. I think especially in a country where we've had continuous traumatic stress, we've had complex PTSD, we've had moments in which things have been difficult for certain demographic groups and other demographic groups in a different way. But this time, as a nation, we're collectively going through something very difficult.
What happens when you get overwhelmed, either with the amount of information, the amount of fake news that's also floating about, and the fact that you can't change your situation besides the things that you've mentioned?
I think that's why it's so important to establish a routine of what is healthy for you. Information through the form of social media, through the form of print media, visual media, all of that can be beneficial, but it can also elicit a lot of anxiety. So I think you need to manage how much exposure you're giving yourself and see what is the benefit of that exposure for you and what are the pros and cons essentially. And I think in that regard, it's very important to almost see if this is something that's causing me more stress than good, let me try and limit that level of exposure. Let me try and contain my circle of responsibility, contain my circle of autonomous action that I can utilize to get a better grasp on things.
Sikander Kalla, a clinical psychologist, joining us via Skype from Johannesburg, discussing different coping mechanisms as South Africa is in day 8 of lockdown. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon.